So for a while now, the term games journalist and games critic have been conflated to mean the same thing, and it really rubs me up the wrong way. It's wrong, it's unhelpful, and it's frustrating. So let me explain what the differences are. So in my mind, journalism is conveying information. Most often that takes the form of news. And because it's news, it's meant to be objective. It's meant to be based on facts without opinion, though obviously if you look at the tabloid press, that's clearly not always the case. Criticism, on the other hand, is judging something as an individual, and it's then explaining to an audience the thought process of how you came to a judgment on a certain thing. Because of this, critics mostly do reviews, and in the case of games criticism, it's previews as well. And it's a qualitative endeavour. It's based on opinion. It's not really based on facts, though of course facts can come into criticism. It's taste, basically. Both journalists and critics can and often do work in the written word, but it's not solely contained to the written word. So a YouTuber, for example, could be a critic, could be a journalist, could do either of those things. It doesn't have to be words written down on a page. I think it is really important at this point to state that journalism is not a higher form than criticism, and criticism is not a higher form than journalism. They are two very separate things, and they are on equal playing fields. And just because somebody is a journalist, it doesn't mean that they can't do criticism. And just because somebody is traditionally a critic, it doesn't mean that they can't do journalism. They can do both things. So for example, my job is most of the time doing previews and reviews and such, so most of the time I'm a critic. I describe myself as a games critic. But when I go to conferences and report on, let's say, a talk, I am engaging in journalism. I've got my journalist's hat on at that point. And I really do get upset about people mixing up journalism and criticism. Partly it's because I'm a terrible pedant, and journalism and criticism, they are not the same thing. You wouldn't look at a bowl that is full of oranges and apples and say, oh look, a bowl of oranges. They're not the same thing. They're all fruit, absolutely. They're all delicious nature's treats, but they're not the same thing. And to insinuate that they are the same thing is really misleading. And it's misleading because sometimes critics will be referred to as journalists, and they will be held up to journalistic standards within criticism. Let me give you an example. Lots and lots of times I'll see critics who are criticised by commenters for not being objective in their reviews. And the reason is that these people think that those people who are doing reviews are engaging in journalism, which is supposedly meant to be completely objective, completely without opinion. And therefore, if they're putting their own opinions into reviews, then that's not journalism and they're bad journalists. And it's like, no, they're good critics. They're not bad journalists because they're not doing journalism. And that kind of thing really does worry me a little bit, because when commenters think that reviewers should be journalistic, I just sit and wonder why on earth anybody would want or think that they want an objective review. And I genuinely don't think that commenters understand what an objective review would be. But it's upsetting because I want to see criticism get better, because obviously that's a field that I work in. I want to see journalism get better, of course, but I really want to see criticism get even more sophisticated, especially within games culture. And I think that if we keep conflating the two things of criticism and journalism, then I don't see us really moving past that. Journalists, critics, not the same thing, and that's totally okay. Thank you again so much for watching. It really does make my day that anybody watches these things. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit the subscribe button, and do please share this video with a friend.